Good morning again. I can tell that the makeshift podium that we use, the pulpit that we use, was for someone much taller than I. Don't forget that Thursday nights are our financial seminars, and that's who was using this before. Sheila. Anyway, I know that Jesus loves rock and roll. We incorporate so many different mediums in our worship experience because it's important that we reach the lost, reach out to those who think differently, act differently, receive the message differently. And that was, of course, Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton. But what the message was behind their rock and roll was about being in the presence of God. Our lives must be in the presence of God. And that is the issue for today. There's a passage that talks about Jesus being led into a trap to understand how he fits into the world and how the world fits into God. And the trap was about paying taxes. In the discussion that Jesus has, he wonders to himself, to what will I compare this generation? I'm thinking that God asked that same question of every generation. To what will I compare this generation? If God required us to pay dues in return for the things that God provides to us and for us, it seems to me that the truth lies in something less tangible, more intangible, more us than it. Today's story talks about this intense clash between Jesus, his teachings, his healings, his persona, as they butt heads with the religious adversaries of their time. He even refers to, as a setup for them, he even refers to John the Baptist as the Elijah to come. But he's puzzled. Jesus is puzzled in what to compare them to in the world that God has created. It comes to us in the Gospel of Matthew. It is the 22nd chapter. It is the 15th through the 22nd verse. In my Bible, it's called Paying Taxes to Caesar. Hear the words of God through the messenger Matthew. And then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he asked them, whose portrait is this? And whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And so they heard this and were amazed. And they left him and went away. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Why do you think that the Pharisees would send with their entourage Herodians? And who in the world were the Herodians anyway? You see, The Pharisees were a religious group, and the Herodians were a political group, and they did not clash. They did not mix at all. They clashed in almost every situation. They opposed the Pharisees, and the Pharisees opposed them. Herodians were followers of that political system under Herod. And they were okay with Rome being in charge, and they were okay with paying Roman taxes. However, to entrap the insurgent Jesus, they were willing to form this alliance of convenience. As I think back with the wisdom that we have in our day, how idiotic it seems to me that anyone would come against Jesus to try to trap him. But the proof that all of humankind seeks is tangible. The proof that God offers is intangible. So Jesus says to them, the money that you use to pay taxes has an image of Caesar. Give that to Caesar. What belongs to God, give back to God. I ran across a cute little story. It happened in Washington, D.C., and it was late at night, and a congressman was walking home on the sidewalks, and out of the shadows jumps a mugger with a ski hat over a ski mask over his face, and he sticks a gun into the congressman's ribs, and he says, "Give me your money." The congressman looks at him and he says, "You can't do that. I'm a congressman of the United States government." The mugger thought for a second. He says, "In that case, give me back my money." The worry for the religious and political leaders of their day was how popular Jesus was becoming. Jesus' teaching, Jesus' healing, and this trap. In this trap, they were hoping to dishonor who Jesus was, to make him out to be a fraud, a charlatan, or a revolutionist. Any of those would work. Many of you know that the other day I lost my cell phone. Or somebody found my cell phone. Or somebody took my cell phone. I didn't know what to do. It's got all of my life. Pictures of my grandson. Phone numbers of our church. So when I called my carrier, they said, well, you can do several things. One is right away, go in and lock it. So I locked it, and they said, it'll give you a space to leave a message. So I said, this phone belongs to Reverend Kent Zimmermann. There is a reward. Lock it. Now, I have no idea whether it'll lock it with the power, because by now the battery's probably dead. But they told me not to worry, we can ping your phone. I said, pardon me? I don't know what a ping is, but I'm not sure I want you to do that to my phone. And they said, no, it's a way we communicate with the GPS system in your phone. Do you even know what GPS means? Global Positioning Satellite. And so somehow they talk. Yeah. They get together. And look, here's a map of the United States, and here's a map of the southwest, the eastern United States, and here's a map of Florida, and here's a map of north central Florida, and here's a map of Chiefland. Here's your phone. By that time, I've already been to every restaurant that Candy and I went to. The church, 15 times. My house, 20 times. My car, at least 30 times. What is it they say about a person that keeps doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result?
Yeah, we won't say it here.
Please don't. It is the way I felt.
Yeah.
But I was not going to give up on my phone. So anyway, they ping it. to a location. Turns out it's a location with one house. It's not like all of Chico, it's just one house. So in my boldness, I tell Candy, get in the car, we're going to get my phone back. So I drive up to this one house. Not that it matters, but there's a flag nailed to the wall. Not that it matters, but there's a dog about this tall on a leash between me and the front door. Not that it matters, but when I got to the front door, there's one of those big punching bags. I'm not intimidated in the slightest. The dog's ears pop up like this, and he looks at me like, I don't know you. I said, oh, what a cute puppy you are. He just about licked me to death before I got to the front door. I pounded on the door, being very bold. Nobody was home. So I went back and knocked on the door again. The nicest guy came to the door, and I said, it's the church's phone. Verizon made me do this. I had nothing to do with it. But it was worth just knocking on your door because you know how expensive cell phones are today. Everything, my whole life, my grandbaby's on it. And the guy looks at me like, who did you say you were? And I said, oh, I lost my phone. And they pinged it to this address. He goes, they did what? I went through that whole routine of telling him what a ping was. And he said, well, I don't have your phone. Oh. His wife walked through he says, honey, did you find a phone anywhere? No. He says, my son's out and about. He says, I'll check with him. I said, I'm sure that whoever found it was trying to figure out a way to get in touch with me. Oh, tell your son I'm offering a reward. He said he would call me. Several things encouraged my decision on how to approach that situation. First was the dog, second was the flag, third was the punching bag. Either way, I still don't have my phone. I think that Jesus had better results from his rebuttal than I had with mine. But we're talking about taxes. We're talking about things that belong to us and things that belong to God. Did you know that taxes like the Roman taxes, we call them income tax, didn't start in this country until 1913? And did you know that it was 1%? And you know why they argued about it? Because they said to those trying to interact with a income tax, if we give you it 1%, before you know it, you'll want 5%. Imagine that. But what does it really matter anyway? Because everything we own, everything we have belongs to God anyway. The psalmist of the 24th Psalm says, the world and all who live in it belong to God. Amen. My father took his son to Mickey D's just for a snack in the mid-afternoon. They didn't get to spend much time together, so they go into the restaurant and they go up to the counter and they order a large fry and two drinks. They sit down at the table and his dad takes the placemat and takes the box of french fries and shakes them out on the placemat, slides the drink over with a straw and then gives it to his son, and he reaches for a french fry and the kid goes, Can you imagine what was going through the thought and the mind of that father? I bought the fries. I brought my kid. Actually, I brought my kid into the world. I brought my kid to Mickey D's. I bought the french fries and the drinks, and he doesn't want to share with me? What would he do if I bought the french fries, put them out on the table, and kept them away from him? But no, I came to share it. Because I just want to spend a little time with my child. Why didn't my son understand that? I created this opportunity just to spend time with my child. Isn't that the way God responds to us? God takes us to Mickey D's, offers us a banquet of all the things that we need, that we want, and we do the same thing. This is mine. You don't have to share if you choose not to. But God did create everything. God owns everything. God shares everything. And we are only stewards of all that God has created. You know what stewards mean? It comes from a Greek word meaning one who manages a household. In their day, the wealthy people would hire a steward to run their business, take care of all the things that were necessary to run their household. And they were given carte blanche authority that no matter what they needed, they were empowered, authorized to make it happen, even though they did not own the estate. Here's a name you may not be familiar with. His name is Michael Larson. He's been a steward for Bill and Melinda Gates for quite some time. Back in the old days when all they had was $5 billion. And they trust him to take care of all of the estate. All the money, all the things that happen, all the investing, everything. And today, their net worth is somewhere around $81 billion, even though they give much of it away. I have complete trust in Michael because we're only stewards of God's investment anyway. You see, Bill and Melinda see the most thrilling part of life is how God multiplies the gifts we're given. Remember the fish and the loaves? I use that prayer so often. And when I bring the offering up here, I hold those baskets up and you see me mumbling to God. Almost all the time I'm saying, take it, Lord. Multiply it, Lord. Turn it into ministry, into outreach. I'm not praying that we get more money. I'm praying that God will allow us to continue our ministry together to the world. It's not about what we have. It's what God chooses for us to do with what God owns. When Jesus shows them the coin and it has the image, the icon of Caesar, and he asks them whose image is on the coin, and they say Caesar, he says, then let him have it. Give it back. The inverse is also true. If it doesn't have Caesar's image on it, whose image does it have? And I'm reminded of that passage, we are created in the image of God. And the point that Jesus was trying to make is, your image is God's image. Give back to God what is God's. We are in the image of God. We are God's. Give your life to God. At a Wednesday evening church meeting, a very wealthy man stood up and he wanted to give a testimony. And so the pastor said, well, by all means. Gave him a microphone and gave him the floor to speak. He says, I'm a millionaire, and I attribute all of my blessings to the richness and the blessings that God has made happen. He says, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was a young man, and I had but $1 to my name. And there was a revival tent in our town. And as a young man, I stumbled into that tent, that revival tent, and I sat there and I heard this missionary talk about God working in the world, and I was so moved, so touched, that I took that dollar and I said, if I give this dollar, it's all I have. Or I could choose to just thank him for a wonderful testimony. And he says, and that night, I gave that dollar to the Lord. And I believe that God has blessed that decision, and that's the reason that I'm a rich man today. Well, the whole crowd was moved, cheered for his testimony. And he went and took his seat. And in the seat next to him was this little old lady sitting there, and she leaned over and she says, sir, that was a wonderful story. I dare you to do it again. We belong to God. That's all that God seeks in return. Those kinds of examples become what Jesus can compare our generation to. How God works in us, through us, with us. That's what Jesus will compare our generation to. And all the children say?
Amen.
Amen.